From making a shocking comeback after losing to Alex Pereira after 5 whole months, to talks about changing the rules for a potential matchup with Bo Nickal, here's a look at what's next for Israel Adesanya after his latest matchup. And the first thing on the list is regaining his footing. In a stunning turn of events, the former pound-for-pound ace has regained his championship footing after a defeat to his longtime nemesis, Pereira. The UFC 287 pay-per-view show in Miami was the stage for Adesanya's epic comeback as he knocked out Pereira in the second round, avenging his previous losses to the Brazilian strongman. It was a sweet victory for Adesanya, who'd been at the top of the game for over 3 years before the upset defeat. Izzy's journey to reclaiming the championship has been nothing short of thrilling. He'd previously won the belt from Robert Whittaker in 2019 and even successfully defended it 5 times before the setback. The only other loss during that period was when he challenged then light heavyweight champ Jan Blachowicz at UFC 259 in 2021. Now that Adesanya is a 2-time champion, fight fans and pundits alike are buzzing with excitement, wondering what his next move will be. Let's take a look at some possible options for the last stylebender. First off, there's Alex Pereira. Just imagine the hype around a 5th showdown between these two heavy hitters. It's like the ultimate battle of rivals, a pentology that fight fans can't get enough of. They've faced off before in various different combat sports settings, and while Pereira may have taken the previous win, Adesanya just showed who's boss with that sweet second-round knockout at UFC 287. But the score is still tied at 1-1 in the octagon, and you can bet that Dana White is itching to put them together for a rematch. After all, this is the guy who gave us a trilogy between Edwards and Usman, and even a 4th fight between Moreno and his opponent at UFC 283. So, why not a 5th between Adesanya and Pereira? Sure, Pereira's struggles with making weight at 185 pounds could be a roadblock, but that's just a small hiccup in the grand scheme of things. The real obstacle here is the sheer intensity of their rivalry. These guys have a history that goes beyond the octagon, and the animosity between them is intense. You can feel the tension every time they step into the cage together. But hey, that's what makes it all so damn exciting. The drama, the trash talk, the anticipation of who will claim the tiebreaker. It's like a blockbuster movie that you can't wait to see. And with this recent win, the stakes are higher than ever. Will Pereira seek revenge and reclaim his title? Or will Adesanya solidify his legacy as one of the greatest middleweights of all time? But of course, it'll be a while before these two throw it down again. So until then, how about a matchup against Dricus du Plessis? Get ready for some serious African pride, folks, because du Plessis is here to claim his spot as the true African champion in the UFC. This South African middleweight contender is not just another run-of-the-mill fighter. He's a kickboxing graduate who's been making waves in the MMA world ever since he turned pro a decade ago. In a recent verbal grenade lobbed toward the 2 Nigerian-born UFC champions, du Plessis didn't hold back. He proudly claimed that he and his teammate, Cameron Simon, are the true African fighters in the UFC. They breathe African air, wake up in Africa every day, train in Africa, and are African-born and raised. They still reside in Africa and train elsewhere. According to the South African, the belts may have gone to America and New Zealand, but he's determined to take one back to Africa. And you know what? This fiery statement has ignited some serious excitement in the MMA community. Even Dana White has long been hinting at producing a show in Africa, and a grudge match between du Plessis and the current African champions, Adesanya and Usman, would be an absolute blockbuster. It would be a battle of African pride, a showdown to determine who truly represents the heart and soul of Africa in the octagon. And if that's not in the cards, there's always Khamzat Chimaev. The Chechen-born Swedish-based chatterbox has been making waves in the welterweight and middleweight divisions ever since bursting onto the scene in the midst of the pandemic on the infamous Fight Island in the United Arab Emirates. This fiery fighter has been relentless in his pursuit of mayhem. He's constantly taunting and provoking any potential opponents who dare to cross his path. With wins over big names like Gilbert Burns and Kevin Holland in 2020, he's been on a rampage, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. But it's not just his fighting prowess that has caught the attention of the UFC community. The Chechen's brash personality and ability to draw attention have made him a polarizing figure in the sport. He's been known to call out big names, including Adesanya, even telling former UFC champ Henry Cejudo that he'd take off his head if they were to fight. Adesanya, never one to shy away from verbal sparring, has acknowledged Chimaev's unique ability to capture the spotlight. In an interview with True Geordie, he admitted that Chimaev's antics had piqued his interest. "I don't know about you, but I'll take that as confirmation." If not this, Jamal Hill is also an enticing prospect. When it comes to challenging the status quo, Adesanya isn't afraid to blaze his own trail. As we've seen before, he's shown a willingness to venture into uncharted territory in pursuit of greatness. In a bold move, the guy once jumped up to the 205-pound division in order to challenge then-champion Jan Blachowicz, with dreams of holding 2 titles simultaneously. Despite falling short in that attempt with a unanimous decision loss to the larger and more grounded adept fighter, Adesanya hasn't ruled out the idea of trying again. His last loss to Pereira may have put a temporary halt to his momentum, but now that he's regained his middleweight belt and has a stellar record against the top-ranked fighters in the division, he may be itching for another out-of-the-box challenge. And that's where Jamal Hill comes into the picture. Hill, the lanky American who recently claimed the light heavyweight championship with a dominant victory over Glover Teixeira, has been vocal about his intentions to move up to middleweight and take on Pereira. However, Adesanya may have other plans in mind. He's known for pushing his limits and testing himself against all odds, so facing off against this foe might allow him to test the heavy waters once more. Lastly, though it may be a pipe dream, I'm sure you can all agree that a matchup against Bo Nickal is something we all want to see happen. The NCAA wrestling phenom has been making waves in the UFC with his lightning-fast victories and unshakable confidence. Despite having only 4 pro fights and 1 UFC win under his belt, he's already talking about taking on the elite fighters in the division and making a run for the title. His dominant performances on the Contender Series and his bonus-worthy debut at UFC 285 have caught the attention of fight fans and Dana White alike. Some may say that a fight wouldn't be possible unless White straight-up changes the rules. I personally believe that it won't be long before we see Nickal in a high-stakes matchup. Even Adesanya has commented on Nickal's wrestling background, while also warning him that MMA was a different beast altogether, and that he had many ways to exploit wrestlers like him. But hey, you can't deny that it's better than a potential Adesanya versus Vettori 3. Well, that's everything in the cards for Adesanya after UFC 287.